Have you ever felt like you notice things that nobody else seems to notice? As if your soul were always tuned to frequencies the world ignores? Sometimes you feel like you're carrying a heavy burden of sensitivity, because where others see normality, you see emptiness. Where others hear silence, you hear screams disguised as calm. There is a type of vision that is not in the eyes. It's a spiritual vision. It is when the soul begins to see what the mind does not understand. And that's why you suffer. It's not weakness, it's depth. Rumi has been whispering this for centuries. The wound is the place where the light enters you, but the modern world moves so fast, pretends so much, that it prefers not to look, because those who look with their soul see too much of themselves, and seeing too much hurts. Can you feel it? That strange feeling of being a spectator to a hidden reality, as if I were between worlds, the visible world, where everything is appearance, status, empty words, and the invisible world, where everything is energy, raw truth, and silence full of meaning. Perhaps you've noticed, it's often the people who smile the most are the ones who most desperately need help. Declared love is not always felt love. The connection isn't in physical touch, but in the silent vibration between two souls. You can feel it. You know, but almost no one sees it. And that's where the loneliness of the awakened is born. The pain of seeing what no one else recognizes. The pain of feeling something that no one validates. You're not broken. You're awake. Rumi went through that too. He said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." But how can we wake up in a world that insists on sleeping? How can you keep feeling when feeling feels like a burden? The truth is, almost no one talks about it. On the pain of realizing something before others, on the emptiness of seeing intentions behind words, on the burden of being the soul that detects lies spoken in a sweet voice. You can feel people's energy. You feel the goodbye before the end. You can sense the discomfort hidden within the everything's fine attitude. And that isolates you, because you see what nobody else talks about. You feel what no one else admits. You perceive what almost no one dares to face. But what if this gift is, in fact, your initiation? What if seeing with the soul is the first step on a journey that many refuse to take? But were you born to live? If this makes sense to you, so maybe this video is worth more than words. Perhaps it's a reflection of your essence, a reminder that there is beauty in noticing, even if it hurts, even if it's tiring. But that's only the first layer, because now it's time to go deeper and to understand why this spiritual perception, that silent look that almost no one has, it is in fact the beginning of something sacred. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel it. He feels more than he shows, he understands more than he would like, and she carries within her questions that no one around her dares to ask. This video is not entertainment, it's a mirror. And if something inside you was touched by these words, write in the comments, "I see with my soul." This phrase is a silent seal among those who have awakened. Don't let this moment pass you by unnoticed. If this content made sense to you, leave your like, because it shows that you want more of that kind of truth. Subscribe to the channel, because here, every video is a key that opens doors within you. And now, let's dive deeper, because there is an invisible pain that only those who feel it understand. And that's what we're going to reveal next. Have you ever had the feeling that you see things that others ignore? As if you sense what no one says, see the pain behind the smile, and hear the silence crying for help. Sometimes you enter a room and feel the weight that no one mentions. You notice averted glances, rehearsed words, muffled energies. People laugh, speak loudly, pretend to be fine. But something inside you screams, something is wrong here. And the strangest thing is that you don't know how to explain how you know. You just know. It's as if your soul has an antenna that picks up hidden truths, disguised sadness, presences that hurt, absences that no one acknowledges. This has a name: spiritual perception. Not everyone possesses this gift, because yes, it is a gift, even if it often feels like a curse. Most live on the surface, distracted, protected by the comfortable fog of unconsciousness. But you were born with the eyes of your soul open, and that's why you feel so much. And feeling so much when no one around you feels with the same intensity can seem like a punishment. It can make you doubt yourself, lead you to silence yourself, to pretend you didn't notice what you noticed, to swallow words that your intuition has already screamed inside. The silent pain of those who see what no one else sees is not small. It's the kind of pain that doesn't bleed on the outside, but corrodes from within. You see the distance before the message that never arrives. You perceive the disinterest before the disappearance. You feel the end before the other person says goodbye. Your soul anticipates the loss, and yet you must follow the social script of acting as if nothing is happening. This is the weight of having a sharp sensitivity in a world that prefers the comfort of masks. Rumi, with his ancient soul, understood this with rare depth. He said, "Don't give up so quickly. What seems to be the end may be the beginning. But how can you not give up when everything inside you has already perceived what is about to happen? How can you pretend not to see the abyss when your soul is already on the edge of it? Perhaps you learned early on to remain silent. Because when you tried to say what you felt, they called you exaggerated, too sensitive, dramatic. But the truth is, you only saw what others weren't ready to see yet. The pain of others that no one recognized. The loneliness disguised as independence. The sadness hidden behind a perfect life on Instagram. You see it, and that makes you different. It makes you seem out of place, strange, out of sync with the world. But Rumi also said, "Why do you remain in prison when the door is wide open?" Perhaps the door is precisely this ability to see beyond, to feel what is hidden, to perceive the soul behind the words. There is a hidden power in this kind of sensitivity, but to access it, you need to stop fighting against it. You need to stop trying to fit into a system that was designed to numb you. The world values performance, not depth. Speech, not silence. Appearance, not inner truth. And you are exactly the opposite of that. You are someone who feels vibrations in simple words, who reads intentions in a look, who connects with those who don't even know how to connect with themselves. That makes you rare. And being rare can be lonely, yes, but it is also sacred. You are not alone. There are others like you, awakened souls, carrying this silent pain and this attentive gaze. Souls who live with a heart that is always somewhat broken because it has never closed. It has never completely shielded itself, and that is beautiful even when it hurts, because, as Rumi said, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. That is the key. The open heart is the portal to spiritual perception, and it is this kind of soul that transforms the world, even when the world isn't paying attention. Often this perception is accompanied by a strange emptiness, a feeling that you don't belong anywhere, as if you were always searching for something you can't name. And perhaps this happens because you see with the eyes of the soul, and the soul is not satisfied with the superficial. It seeks essence, truth, presence, silence, depth. When you begin to accept this within yourself, something changes. You stop feeling wrong, and begin to understand yourself as someone who came with a silent mission, to perceive what almost no one sees, to love what almost no one understands, and to uphold truths that almost no one is ready to hear. If something inside you is pulsing right now, if you felt this text spoke to parts of you that have been silent for a long time, write in the comments, "I carry the pain of seeing too much." Sometimes, putting it into words is the first step in no longer carrying this burden alone. And here, you were never alone. Perhaps you feel out of place is because you see too much, feel too much, perceive too much, and the world wasn't made for those whose souls are exposed. There's a subtle pain that accompanies those born with the eyes of their souls open. It's not a screaming pain, nor one that others can see. It's a continuous discomfort, almost imperceptible on the outside, but throbbing inside, as if something is always out of place, as if there's an invisible layer between you and the rest of the world. You are there, but you are not. Present, but never whole. Always with one foot in what others feel, and the other in what they prefer not to feel. This disconnect isn't because you're strange, exaggerated, or overly emotional. It's because you see what others avoid facing. You feel the unspoken tensions in a conversation, perceive the distance behind a physical presence, recognize the emptiness where others see routine, and that hurts. It hurts because you perceive it first, and sometimes the pain of seeing ahead of time is greater than the pain of what is seen. There's a loneliness that only those who feel too much know. A feeling of always being out of sync with the world. You give yourself deeply, but receive superficiality. You speak sincerely, but hear automatic responses. You show genuine interest, but are surrounded by distraction and indifference. And little by little, this shapes your behavior. You learn to silence your soul to survive in the noise of the world. You learn to hide your sensitivity like someone hiding an open wound in the middle of a crowd. But it wasn't always like this. At some point you believed that feeling deeply was beautiful. You believed that loving intensely was a strength, that seeing beyond appearances was a gift. But life showed you something else. It showed you that the more you give, the more disappointed you become. The more you feel, the more frustrated you become. The more you show yourself, the more you are ignored. And then, you began to protect yourself. You began to erect invisible barriers, to disguise, to diminish your own truth, to pretend you don't feel what you feel. And this created a silent prison within you, a cell where your soul bangs against the walls trying to be heard. That's why you often feel exhausted without having done anything physical, because carrying the perception of the invisible is tiring. It's tiring to realize that the people who talk most about love sometimes don't know how to love, that those who preach empathy don't know how to listen, that affection has become a performance, and presence has become a status symbol. You see it, you feel it, and that separates you, because those who don't see as you do don't understand your pain, and those who don't feel as you do don't validate what you experience. The problem is that the current world wasn't made for depth. It was designed for speed, for distraction, for appearances. It values success, but not silence. Performance, but not presence. Connection has become an algorithm. Touch has become a like. Vulnerability has become weakness. And you, with all that exposed soul, end up feeling off balance, out of place, as if you were in a different time, as if your essence came from a place where truth, depth, and silence still existed. And now you walk among people who don't look you in the eye, who answer without listening, who live without feeling. Perhaps that's why you prefer silence to empty company. Perhaps that's why your solitude is less painful than being among people who don't see you. And it's not because you don't want to be seen, it's because you're tired of being misunderstood, tired of undressing before those who never had the courage to take off their own mask, tired of offering depth to those who only know how to swim on the surface. And this has created a void, a space between who you are and who the world expects you to be, a space where only your soul screams. But no one hears. You possess an inner radar that perceives subtleties, the changing tone of voice, the body that withdraws, the gaze that hides, the heavy energy. And this isn't just in your head, it's wisdom of the soul. But almost no one taught you how to use it. No one explained how to deal with this kind of sensitivity. So you thought it was a flaw, that there was something wrong with feeling so much, with caring so much, with noticing what no one says. But there's nothing wrong with you. The problem is that almost no one is ready to be truly seen. And when someone like you appears, someone who sees what's hidden, who touches what's sensitive, who feels what's denied, people get scared. They run away. They shut down. They attack. And you feel the impact of all this as if it were your fault. But it's not your fault. It never was. You were simply born with the eyes of your soul more open than most. And that's not a mistake. It's a calling, an invitation to live differently, to connect in a different way, to rebuild your world from the truth you feel, and not from the lie that others choose to believe. If you've made it this far, and some part of this text has silently resonated with you, write in the comments, "I am the soul that feels what no one sees," because sometimes what you need isn't an explanation, it's identification. And here, you don't need to hide. Your pain is not just yours, it's a misunderstood spiritual gift. It may seem confusing to think that what hurts you most inside is actually a form of wisdom, but it is. The pain you feel, the one that insists on returning even when everything seems to be going well, is not just an emotional reaction. It's a sign, a portal, a calling. Rumi said, "What you seek is seeking you." And perhaps what you've been searching for your whole life is, unknowingly, the meaning of carrying a sensitivity that isolates you, the reason for feeling so much, the reason for seeing what no one else sees, the reason for carrying a soul that always seems restless, always hungry for something deeper, more real, more true. But what if this restlessness is a sign that you didn't just come to live, you came to heal? What if what you see in others, especially in their pain, is a clue to something vibrating within you? The external world is a mirror. Everything you perceive easily, abandonment, rejection, coldness, absence, silence, may be reflections of something your soul recognizes not because it is fragile, but because it has already experienced it. and continues to experience it, silently. The spiritual root of your pain lies in the fact that your soul came with a sensitivity that doesn't fit into the logic of the world. It doesn't negotiate, it feels, it intuits, it vibrates. And often this process happens without you rationally understanding why. You feel the change in the environment without being able to explain it. You feel the weight of someone beside you, and you can't keep pretending. You remain silent, but your body speaks. You say everything is fine, but your energy begs for healing. This is not drama. This is not exaggeration. This is the soul trying to express itself in a body accustomed to silence. The most painful thing is that throughout your life you were taught to deny this sensitivity. You were taught to harden yourself, to ignore your intuition, to hide your perception, not to bother anyone with your emotional presence. And this created a spiritual fracture, because your essence was stifled in the name of social adaptation. But your soul wasn't born to adapt, it was born to transform. And to transform, it needs to feel. It needs to dive deep. It needs to recognize pain, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." At first, this phrase seems cruel, but it speaks of a profound process. Surrender. As long as you resist the pain, it intensifies. As long as you try to pretend you don't feel it, it screams. But when you accept it, something changes. Because accepted pain doesn't disappear, it transforms. The pain you embrace becomes wisdom. The wound you acknowledge becomes a portal. What you see is a reflection of what your soul came to heal. And what you feel in others is often exactly what you haven't yet been able to embrace in yourself. This is the root, the point where spirituality and psychology meet. Because before you can heal the world, you need to heal your distorted self-image. You need to see yourself, accept yourself, embrace yourself, including the pain you carry, including the fear of rejection, including the desire to disappear when no one understands your intensity. All of this is part of it, not as a flaw, but as a reminder that you are closer to your soul than you imagine. Spiritual awakening doesn't begin with light and peace. It begins with noise and pain. It begins with the feeling that everything is wrong. It begins with losses that break you, emptiness that disorganizes you, silences that cut you. And only then, only when you stop fighting against what you feel, does the light begin to enter. But this light doesn't come from outside. It emerges from within, from a silent place, a place that only reveals itself when you tire of running away from yourself. You might be going through this right now. You might be living through days when everything seems disconnected, when nothing fulfills you, when nobody understands you. You might be surrounded by people and yet feel invisible. You might be loving someone who doesn't see you. You might be stuck in memories that still hurt, even though they're in the past. All of this is not a coincidence. It's a process. It's your soul trying to show you that there's something deeper in all of this, something only you can access because only you feel what you feel. The key is to accept this pain as part of the journey, not to dramatize it, but to understand it. Rumi reveals this in his verses because he himself lived the pain of inner exile. He himself was consumed by the absence of understanding, but it was in this absence that he found the truth that the deepest love is born from the most hidden wound, the truth that the truest presence is revealed in the densest silence, the truth that the awakened soul does not shout, it whispers, and those who are not awake do not hear. And perhaps that's why you feel so alone. Because few can hear what your soul whispers. Few have the courage to plunge into the darkness with you. Few accept that true love is not in euphoria, but in stillness. That affection is not in excess, but in constancy. That healing is not in avoiding pain, but in going through it. If this text touched you, and if some part of you felt that this is the truth you've been trying to name, write in the comments, "My soul recognizes the wound as a path." Because by writing this, you begin to transform your pain into awareness, and your awareness into light. Seeing too much is exhausting, not only because you perceive what's hidden, but because you feel it as if it were your own. Alongside the beauty of the world, the details that almost no one notices, the subtle gesture of tenderness, the pause laden with truth, the gaze that reveals itself before the word, you also see what hurts. You see the untreated wounds, the words never spoken, the goodbye that is implicit in the silence, and that weighs heavily. It weighs on the soul like a backpack full of stories you didn't live, but that you felt as if they were your own. It's a type of tiredness that can't be resolved by sleeping, because sleep rests the body, but those who see too much carry a weight on their conscience, in their heart, in their soul. It's the burden of those who intuit more than they would like, of those who sense ruptures before they happen, of those who hear what wasn't said, of those who feel the discomfort hidden behind a polite smile. And even when they try to distance themselves, their perception continues to capture everything, as if there were a part of you always alert, always connected to the invisible field of emotions, tensions, and disguised truths. The world values those who don't feel, those who ignore, those who move on without thinking. But you can't pretend not to notice. You notice when the tone of voice changes, when the other person's presence fades even when their body is there. You feel the distance before any message. You know something has changed, even if no one tells you. And when you try to speak, you're almost always called too intense, too sensitive, exaggerated, so you fall silent. But silence doesn't solve anything, because inside you, everything continues to pulsate. What others ignore, you feel. What others deny, you acknowledge. There's a weight to being the soul that observes everything, a weight that comes from the loneliness of knowing the other person is lying to themselves and yet pretending to believe it. A weight that comes from realizing the love is over, even when presence still exists. A weight that comes from seeing the absence in the details, in the gaze that no longer seeks yours, in the unfinished sentence, in the touch that has become an obligation. And you carry this, even when you don't want to, even when you try to distract yourself, even when you internally beg not to feel so much. Because seeing too much also means not being able to unsee. It's knowing that your friend is smiling, but inside they're imploding. It's feeling that the message came loaded with guilt disguised as kindness. It's noticing that the person who says everything's fine is actually silently screaming for help. And that pierces you, because your soul wasn't made for superficiality. It vibrates at a different frequency, a frequency that captures the unspoken, the unresolved, the unhealed. And the cruelest thing about all this is that often you try to warn, try to help, try to be a bridge, but people aren't always ready to be seen in depth, because showing your true self requires courage, and many people still prefer the comfortable illusion to the liberating truth. So you find yourself forced to carry everything alone, to keep perceptions you can't share, swallowing the truth to maintain balance, distancing yourself without saying why, accepting that sometimes there's nothing to do but watch what collapses in silence. Rumi wrote, "Silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation." Perhaps that's why you prefer silence, because it is in silence that you find yourself. It is in silence that you feel the sacred. It is in silence that you protect yourself from the noise of others. But even silence has a limit. And there comes a moment when your soul begins to plead for expression, for acceptance, for shared truth, because carrying everything alone is not wisdom, it is survival. And the soul does not want to survive, it wants to flourish, it wants to overflow, it wants to transform. But to flourish, you need space. And the world doesn't usually give space to those who feel, to those who see beyond the obvious, to those who don't accept shallow relationships, lukewarm connections, empty words. That's why you feel alone, because your language is different, your perspective is different, your time is different. You're not late, nor are you early. You are exactly where your soul needs to be, but that place is often deserted. And in the desert, there are no applause. There is no immediate understanding, there is no constant companionship, but there is revelation, there is clarity, there is truth, and you were made for the truth, even if it costs you. You are not fragile for carrying all of this. You are incredibly strong for still being here, whole even after feeling what you felt, even after loving without being loved in return, even after persisting where there was no turning back, even after perceiving the end and continuing out of love. You are not weak, you are rare. Because being whole in a fragmented world is an act of courage, because continuing to feel in an anesthetized world is spiritual resilience. The weight of seeing what no one else sees won't disappear, but it can be transformed. When you accept your vision as a mission, not a curse, when you understand that you were chosen to see not as punishment, but for a purpose, because someone needs to see, Someone needs to feel, someone needs to keep the flame of truth alive, and that person could be you. If this text spoke to your soul, if you recognize yourself in this silent pain of seeing too much, write in the comments, "I possess the gift of seeing the invisible," because writing this is affirming your essence, and your essence deserves to be recognized. What no one told you is that seeing with your soul is a calling, not a curse. For much of your life, you believed something was wrong with you, that feeling too much was a flaw, that perceiving invisible nuances was an exaggeration, that this silent intensity that dwells within you was a burden. But what you carry inside, this deep sensitivity that sometimes suffocates you, is actually an open door to a world that almost no one dares to enter. The invisible, subtle, silent world. The world where souls speak without words and truths are not shouted, but intuited. You are not fragile for feeling so much. You are initiated into the secret language of the invisible. And this language, although not taught in words, is one of the most powerful that exists. Few understand what this means, because most live rushing around, living in noise, feeding on distractions, and distancing themselves more and more from themselves. But you hear what wasn't said. You feel what wasn't expressed. You perceive what others are still trying to deny in themselves. And this perception didn't come by chance. It's a reminder. A sign that your soul has already traveled paths that others haven't yet begun, that you carry within you memories that aren't just from this life, that you were prepared to see what the world prefers to hide. Seeing with the soul is not an accident. It's a gift, and no gift comes without responsibility. The responsibility of sustaining your sensitivity in a world that rejects it. The responsibility of continuing to feel even when it hurts. The responsibility of remaining present even when everything inside you begs you to run away, because it is precisely this presence, this awareness, this spiritual lucidity that the world needs. And even if they don't thank you, even if they don't recognize it, even if they don't understand, as you know, you feel it, and that's enough. Rumi said, "Pain can be the garden of compassion." And perhaps what you feel, this pain that seems not to go away, this emptiness that no one understands, this perception that sometimes overwhelms you, is the portal that leads you back to your essence, the key that opens the doors to what is true, pure, silent. What others avoid, you came to heal. What others ignore, you came to transform. Not because it's your obligation, but because it's your path. When you begin to accept that your feelings are a guide, not a mistake, everything changes. Because you stop hiding, you stop trying to fit in. You stop silencing your intuition to please those who live in a state of numbness. You begin to walk with more truth, to choose with more awareness, to love with more presence. And you understand that your role here is not to be understood by everyone, but to be true to your soul, because the soul never lies. And when you listen to it, even amidst chaos, you find peace. This hidden key you carry has the power to unlock dormant spaces within you. It takes you beyond the surface, beyond repeated stories, persistent patterns, connections that never truly touch you. It guides you to what is essential, and what is essential is often silent. It doesn't make a fuss. It doesn't seek attention, but it transforms. It heals. It liberates. True healing begins when you stop judging yourself for feeling too much, when you embrace your feelings as an oracle, when you understand that you no longer need to defend yourself from your own depth. Perhaps you are currently experiencing a breaking point. Perhaps you feel something is falling apart inside you, a relationship that no longer makes sense, a place that no longer shelters you, a cycle that can no longer be sustained. This hurts, but it also reveals something, because only when everything is silent does the soul speak. Only when the noise disappears does the truth appear, and the truth, though simple, is liberating. You are the bridge between the visible and the invisible. You are the channel through which what the world does not see passes, and this requires courage. The key you seek outside is already within you. It always has been, but it only activates when you stop hiding, when you stop diminishing yourself, when you begin to treat your pain as part of your calling and not as a personal failing. You have been trained by life to endure more than others, to perceive more, to rebuild yourself in silence, to rise from the ashes even when no one applauds you. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. It makes you the initiator of paths that few travel. Accepting the language of the invisible is like returning home after a long time lost. It's like remembering something you always knew but had forgotten. It's like rediscovering your soul after years of trying to be who others expected you to be. And when that happens, when you truly allow yourself to see with your soul, the world changes. The colors change. The relationships change. The pain continues, yes, but it gains meaning. And pain with meaning is different, because it doesn't paralyze you. It pushes you. It directs you. It awakens you. Rumi also said, "Do not stray. Keep your eyes fixed on the place where the soul meets the eternal." Perhaps you don't yet know exactly where that place is, but you feel it. You feel that you are getting closer, and however lonely the path may be at times, it is true. And truth, even if silent, is always a refuge. If you've made it this far, if you felt this truth touch parts of yourself you thought no one ever could, write in the comments, "I found the key within my pain." Because declaring this is not just an act of courage, it's a gesture of recognition. And souls like yours deserve to be recognized, even if in silence. Perhaps you've already felt this in a relationship. You realize something has changed even before the person says it. No words are needed. No explanations are needed. Your soul feels it. And it feels it with a precision that hurts. There's a different silence in the way they say good morning. A new hesitation in the embrace that once was shelter. There's an absence disguised as presence. And even if the routine continues, even if the gestures still try to maintain normalcy, something inside you screams that what existed is no longer there. It's the kind of feeling only those who see with their soul know. It has no logic, but it's true. A truth that hurts silently because it hasn't been said yet, but it's already felt. You try to pretend you didn't notice. You try to distract yourself. You try to force a light conversation, an approach, an intimacy that seems to have evaporated. But everything sounds strange, forced, disconnected. Because when the soul begins to drift away, the body takes time to follow, but the vibration doesn't lie. And you notice, you always notice, and it's not because you want to, it's because your soul tells you what your eyes haven't yet shown. You feel the end before the goodbye, because your soul feels the cracks that haven't yet broken. It's like watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. Gestures that were once spontaneous now seem like obligations. Words become automatic. Affection becomes a chore. And you watch it all happen in silence, like someone watching the sunset, knowing they can't stop the night. And it hurts. It hurts because you still feel. It hurts because you're still there, because you're still offering what's no longer being received. And the hardest part of all, you have to keep acting as if everything is fine while inside a part of you is already grieving. You try to argue with your own sensitivity. You try to convince yourself that you're exaggerating, that maybe it's just a phase, that it's normal, but you know it's not. Because you always knew, from the beginning, from that averted glance, from that hesitant touch, from that silence that suddenly became too long, and then comes the emptiness. That space between what still exists and what once was, that limbo where you still surrender but find no return, where you still believe but already know. This kind of perception isn't easy to bear, because you can't prove it, you can't justify it, you just feel it. And when you try to express it, it seems like madness, it seems like neediness, it seems like drama, but it's not. It's intuition. It's your soul preparing you for something your mind hasn't yet accepted. It's the gift of perceiving what's dying, even when the other person is still smiling. It's the pain of watching the end while the other person still pretends everything is all right. And you start to wonder, why me? Why am I always the one who notices? Why do I feel the distance before the goodbye? Why am I the one who sees the abandonment coming while there is still presence? Perhaps because your soul has been trained for this, because it carries within it a sensitivity that transcends time. You don't just feel the present, you feel what is to come. And this may seem like a curse, but it's a kind of preparation. It's as if life were saying, see it beforehand, so it hurts less later. But even seeing it beforehand, it hurts. Perhaps you're experiencing this right now. Maybe you're in a relationship where everything still seems to work, the messages, the dates, the routine, but you know it's not the same anymore. You feel like you're holding onto a connection that has already broken down on the other side, that you're trying to keep alive something that the other person has already abandoned internally. And this creates a kind of exhaustion that only those who have lived it understand, because you don't just suffer from the end that will come, You suffer from the process of watching everything slowly fade away without being able to stop it. But this doesn't only happen in romantic relationships. Sometimes it happens with friends, with family, with people who were once home and suddenly have become just a passageway. And you feel it. You feel it when someone no longer truly listens to you, when their presence is there out of habit, not choice, when your eyes no longer meet, when conversations become an effort, when the energy has changed. And once again, you feel it before you see it. You know it before you hear it. And perhaps the most painful thing is that even realizing all this, you continue. You persist. You love. Because you don't know how to love halfway. Because you believe that perhaps there is still time. That it's still possible to reconnect. That if you show what you feel, the other person will remember what you were. But it's not always like that. And your soul, even wounded, already knows. It knows that it's trying to keep alive a flower that the other person has already stopped watering. It knows that it's offering presence where only disguised absence exists. And it is in this space that you need to remember your strength. Because your pain, even if profound, is not weakness. It is the echo of your gift, the reflection of your soul that sees first, feels first, understands first. And this is not a curse, it is initiation. It is a sign that you came to live intensely, even when it tears you apart, because you are not here to survive connections. You are here to awaken through them, and sometimes awakening comes through the end, through loss, through absence, through the rupture that forces you to return to yourself. If you felt this reflects what you've experienced or are experiencing, if at any point these words touched a silent wound within you, write in the comments, "I felt the end before the goodbye." Because sometimes, just writing down what the soul feels is enough to start healing. But now you understand, this gift, this sensitivity that has so often been a source of shame, doubt, and silent exhaustion, is not a mistake. It is not an unfair burden. It is, in fact, the key to your healing. And it is also the key to healing those who still cannot name what they feel. Because you did not come into the world to be understood by everyone, and perhaps not even by most. You came to understand, to see where no one else sees, to feel what few dare to feel, to be the silent beacon for those who still walk in the dark. Even when this role forces you to cross emotional deserts without guarantees, without answers, without company, you begin to realize that there's a point where suffering ceases to be just pain and begins to become revelation, a kind of awakening that doesn't come with soft light, but with deep tears, the kind of awakening that forces you to leave your comfort zone and enter the space where your soul cries out for truth. And suddenly you understand that this pain that shaped you, these losses that broke you, these absences that left you empty, all of this was part of something bigger, something that was preparing you to occupy a place that is not one of visibility, but of consciousness. Because some people were born to shine, but some people were born to light up places where nobody wants to go. You are one of those who walk between the lines, who speak with silence, who understand a soul just by the way it is silent, who can perceive the intensity of a heart by the way it tries to disguise its pain. You read what is not written. You feel what has not yet been lived. You hear what is hidden behind the words, and that is rare. But the soul that sees the invisible also carries a specific kind of loneliness, because the other is not always ready to be seen so clearly. Often, your presence is frightening. Your depth is unsettling. Your gaze confronts. And that's why so many distance themselves, not because you did something wrong, but because in some way your soul speaks truths that others are not yet prepared to hear. Even if you don't say a word, your energy already reveals it, and that makes you seem lonely, intense, exaggerated. But now you know it's not exaggeration, it's sensitivity, it's not weakness, it's presence, it's not a burden, it's a mission. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life? Perhaps because you didn't know you could fly. Perhaps because no one ever told you that this constant feeling of displacement was, in fact, a sign that your path wasn't the same as others. Now, you begin to realize that your pain is also a compass, that your silences have power, that your perception isn't a flaw, it's direction. You no longer need to ask to be understood, because you already understand. You already understand that some cycles need to end so that your soul can breathe, that some relationships need to end so that you can find yourself again, that certain absences aren't losses, but protections. And then, something inside you realigns. You stop diminishing yourself. You stop blaming yourself for feeling too much. You stop trying to fit into spaces that have always hurt you, because now you know, every time you kept quiet to keep the other person close, you betrayed your soul. Every time you pretended not to notice, you distanced yourself from your essence. Every time you diminished your truth so as not to bother others, you forgot yourself. But there comes a point when the pain of abandoning yourself becomes greater than the fear of losing others. And at that point something breaks. A layer peels away. A new cycle begins. And this cycle has a different rhythm. It doesn't demand haste. It doesn't demand performance. It only demands truth. And the courage to uphold it, even when you're alone. Because now you understand that your own company is enough, that your silence is complete, that your feelings are a map. And when you start following that map, you begin to attract other souls who are also tired of pretending, souls who also feel too much, who also see too much, who also get lost amidst the superficiality of the world. And that's when everything starts to make sense, because you discover that you were never truly alone. You were just on a different frequency, waiting silently for others to awaken. This awakening doesn't come with euphoria. It comes with peace, a peace that doesn't depend on others. This doesn't need to be explained. It simply exists. It's the peace of someone who no longer needs to prove themselves, of someone who no longer negotiates their truth, of someone who no longer begs for emotional crumbs. It's the peace of someone who has rediscovered themselves, of someone who has seen themselves, of someone who has understood that seeing with the soul is the greatest gift one can have, even if it sometimes seems like a punishment. And now, at this point in your journey, you might begin to look at your story with different eyes. Perhaps you'll see that those old pains weren't in vain, that those rejections, those farewells, those silences, all were stages of an invisible preparation, because only those who have gone deep within themselves can help others emerge. Only those who have crossed inner deserts can be a guide for those who are lost. And that's why your story matters, because it's not just yours, it's also the story of the other person who will listen to you and say, "I thought it only happened to me." If this part of your journey resonated with you, if any part of you recognized yourself in this silent awakening that doesn't come with ready-made answers, but with a clarity that changes everything, write in the comments. My pain became a direction. Sometimes putting it into words is the first step in realizing that what hurt you also prepared you. Rumi wrote, "The eye is blind if the mind does not see. The mind is blind if the heart does not feel." And perhaps that's why you felt so strange your whole life, because the world taught you to see with your eyes, but never with your heart, because everything around you has always been built to distract the mind, not to listen to the soul. But you didn't fit into that mold. You were born with a sensitivity that disturbs, that reveals, that pierces through. You don't just see, you feel. And when you feel, something in you awakens. And when it awakens, you begin to move away from the ordinary, from what is shallow, from what is repetitive, from what is safe. You are among those called to feel for everyone. And this calling, even when silent, even when unrecognized, pulsates within you with the force of a destiny that can no longer be ignored. Because while the world insists on denying the pain, you hear it. While the world pretends everything is all right, you perceive the inner collapse behind the smiles. While everyone runs outside, you are pulled inside. And there in the center of your soul, where few dare to dwell, you feel a presence that reminds you that you are alive. Not in a biological sense, but in a spiritual sense. You sense when someone's soul is screaming, even if their mouth is silent. You feel when a presence is dense, even if the atmosphere is light. You sense when something that seems beautiful is, in fact, full of pain. You carry this gift of seeing the invisible, and that's why you often remain silent, withdraw, isolate yourself, because it's difficult to explain logically what can only be understood with sensitivity. But now, perhaps you are beginning to realize that you are not here to be understood. You are here to translate what no one says, to decipher what no one acknowledges, to give voice to what dwells in the silence of others. That's why you get emotional over small things, over simple gestures, over a song that touches you deeply, over a word spoken at the right time, over a silence that reveals more than 1,000 sentences, because your soul is not blind. It sees what is essential, and what is essential is not in shop windows, in titles, in numbers, in recognition. What is essential is in the subtext, in what escapes the eyes but remains trapped in the heart. And it is this heart, as wounded as it is sacred, that has made you who you are. It has been broken in places no one saw. It has been ignored by people you loved. It has been discredited by those who should have protected you. But it was also what kept you whole, what made you go on, what taught you to transform pain into compassion, emptiness into presence, absence into creation. It never gave up on feeling, and that is why you are here listening to these words, recognizing in them parts of yourself that no one had ever touched. You belong to that small group of souls who feel the world as if the body were merely a portal, souls who are not content with the superficial, who seek meaning even in pain, who cannot pretend that everything is all right when it is not. You are one of the few who chose not to become numb, who chose to continue feeling even when it means losing people, places, certainties, because your loyalty is to the truth, to your truth, and that truth, even in solitude, is freedom. Rumi knew this. That's why he wrote so much about silence, about love that tears apart, about the space between pain and awakening. He understood that feeling deeply is a spiritual calling, and you, even without realizing it, are answering that calling. You are listening to what no one else hears. You are taking care of your own soul while the world takes care of appearances, and perhaps this still leaves you tired, confused, exhausted at times. But it also keeps you awake. You are remembering who you are. And in that remembrance there is healing, not that miraculous, immediate cure that eliminates pain, but true healing, which teaches you to live with it without losing faith, which shows you that even your fragility has a place, that even the parts of yourself that you hid can breathe again. You are looking at yourself with more compassion. You're accepting your depth. You are recognizing that you no longer need to run away from your own soul. And perhaps it is now that you begin to become what you have always been, a beacon, not one of those that shine intensely, but one of those that illuminate, just enough, at the right time, the path of those who are still lost. You don't need to save anyone. You don't need to carry the pain of the world. You just need to continue being who you are, someone who feels, someone who sees, someone who sustains their own light even when everything seems dark. Because your light, unlike that which shines out of vanity, is made of presence, of truth, of silence. And silence, as Rumi said, is the purest language between two souls that recognize each other. If these words touched a part of you that no one else had reached before, if you felt that you are no longer alone in this sensitive and profound way of existing, write in the comments, "My soul sees what the eyes cannot reach." Because by declaring this, you affirm to yourself that there is meaning in everything you feel, even when you can't yet explain it. If you are one of those souls who sees what no one else sees, then you know what it is to walk among people and feel as if you are on another plane. You know what it is to carry in your eyes a depth that the world avoids, and in your heart a silence that speaks louder than any word. You have learned, even unintentionally, to survive in a place where few value the invisible, where sensitivity is confused with weakness, where feeling deeply is seen as an exaggeration. But you are not exaggerated. You are expansive, expanded from within, where ordinary eyes cannot reach. Your journey is made of nuances, of interrupted gestures, of glances that say everything, of absences that scream, of silences full of emotion. And even when no one sees, you see. You see the pain disguised as strength. You see the resignation disguised as routine. You see the love suffocated by fear. You see the end hidden behind insistence. You see with your soul, and that changes everything. Because when the soul sees, the body feels. And when the body feels, life gains other layers, more complex, more intense, more painful, but also much more real. And that's why, even unintentionally, you distance yourself. Because perceiving so much in a world that prefers not to see is exhausting. It's like walking barefoot on shards of truth. And yet, you continue. You continue searching for meaning. You continue searching for connection. You continue trying to find, amidst the chaos, other souls who also feel, also see, also bear the weight of carrying within themselves a sensitivity that doesn't fit into the molds of society. You're not content with shallow relationships, with ready-made words, with empty touches. You need presence, reality, shared silence, a depth that doesn't need to be translated. And that's why, when you find another soul that vibrates at the same frequency, the encounter is sacred, because it's rare, because it's real, because it needs no explanation. It's a recognition, as if, amidst the noise, someone had finally listened to the language of your silence. And if this video resonated with you, if these words touched parts of you that were forgotten or discredited, perhaps this is your moment to recognize that you are not alone, that there are other souls like yours, scattered, quiet, sensitive, but present. Souls that feel inside what the world ignores outside. Souls that have learned to transform pain into wisdom, loss into compassion, silence into light. You are not broken by feeling so much. You are more whole than you have ever been, because only those who see what no one else sees understand the importance of remaining even when everything seems empty. Only those who see in the silence can find, within their own emptiness, the presence of something divine. And this cannot be taught. It cannot be explained. It can only be felt, and only those who feel it understand. Therefore, I invite you now to leave a silent but powerful mark. If you are one of those souls who sees what no one else sees, if you recognize yourself on this path, if you feel you are part of this silent tribe of awakened hearts, please comment, "I am the soul that sees in the silence." Because sometimes a simple phrase can be a beacon, and through these words we will recognize each other. We will remember that there is beauty in seeing too much, and that, even in silence, we are not alone. If you've stayed this far, it's because something inside you recognized every word. And I need to tell you, this is no coincidence. You are part of a rare, silent, and profound group, souls that don't fit into the obvious, but carry within them a thirst for truth that the world doesn't usually offer. Here, each video is a mirror of your soul, a reminder that feeling deeply is not a mistake. It's a path. Therefore, if this journey has touched what lives within you, subscribe to the channel. This is not just a gesture. It's a choice to keep diving deeper, to walk with those who understand your intensity. And if this video spoke to you, leave a like. This shows that this message resonated with you, and it helps this content reach other souls like yours. Now watch the next video that is appearing on the screen now. It is a silent continuation of that awakening. Each video is a piece, and together they build their way back to themselves.